Welcome to episode 8, our final episode in our series on polycystic ovarian syndrome. In this episode, I'm going to discuss the controversies in the treatment of PCOS and in healthcare in general. I promise you these recommendations and practice patterns are based on actual science. They're not based on dogma or the way everybody else does it. The things that I do are based on very strong evidence to support these practices. The first controversy, I want you to understand that the concept of calories in your food affecting your biochemistry or your fertility or your health is a complete myth. Head explodes. What do you mean, Wilshire? Well, look real carefully, look real closely, look at my hand, look at my tissues, look at my cells. Look all the way down to the cellular level. There are no calorie receptors in biological organisms. They are not there. In my tissues are pumps, gates, electron transport chains, enzymes. All the mechanisms of life are here, but none of them depend on calories. Calories is just a synthetic, artificial concept that give us some idea how much food one is consuming, but calories have nothing to do with the actual biology of life. People who say that, hey, a calorie is a calorie, want you to think that a bite of a steak and its calories is the same thing as a drink of soda with the same calories. Nothing could be farther from the truth. So forget calories, has nothing to do with reality. What allows us to be healthy, what allows us to lose weight or be normal weight or be fertile depends on our hormone levels. Okay, it all depends on hormones, and I'll discuss that a little bit more. Also, it's very important that our body weight depends on things way more important than actual calories. Obviously, the amount of food we eat does have a bearing on our weight, but the concept of people gaining weight because they eat too much has to be obliterated. Okay, I'll give you an example. I had a young female medical student with me last month. She was pregnant. She was eating all the time. She was slender, but every week her belly got a little bigger. I was on a boat with some young teenage Boy Scouts a few months ago. We couldn't buy enough pizzas to keep these young skinny men fed. All right? What do they have in common? Are they eating and then getting fat and growing? No, they don't grow because they're eating. They're eating because they're growing. We've had it completely backwards. We've had the cart in front of the horse for decades now. We overeat because we are growing. Why are we growing? Either we're pregnant or we're young, or our insulin levels are too high. Insulin is causing us to be hungry, it's causing our fat cells to grow, and the normal response is to eat because of it. We've had this completely backwards. Remember, we eat because we're growing, we don't grow because we're eating. Huge quantum shift in understanding. It's very important to understand that. Now, when it comes to actual medical treatments and tests I order, I'm a little bit out of the mainstream on this. A lot of doctors will have a woman with PCOS get what's called a glucose tolerance test, the gold standard for diabetes. I find this test chews up a half a day of a person's life, is very expensive, and adds no real value. The only test we really need to get is something called a hemoglobin A1C. That tells us the average blood glucose a person has. If it's high in the diabetic range, clearly we need to consider diabetes and more severe treatments. If it's a little high, which is very common in PCOS, then the treatments are all the same. It involves carb restriction and weight management. Okay, so a GTT adds nothing. I don't do them. A lot is made of insulin resistance. I want you to understand that insulin resistance is only a formula. Insulin resistance means insulin is high and blood sugars are high. And you can do a division or a multiplication, or get a little fancier with something called a HOMA-IR or a quickie test. Whatever test you want to do is just a formula. It is a distraction, okay? So I don't measure insulin levels because women with PCOS are going to have high insulin levels, okay? Our goal is to lower insulin. We do that by carbohydrate restriction, lowering blood sugars. Insulin levels come down. So there's no point in measuring an insulin level, okay? I'll also put a finer point on this. Women with lean PCOS do have higher insulin levels than average, but they tend not to be too high, and they're generally not at risk for diabetes any higher than the general population. So it's another reason not to order insulin levels, particularly on that type of PCOS. Another thing I don't do, I do not check lipids or the cholesterol panels you see everybody get. We're going to have more videos in the future on how generally screwed up our understanding of cholesterol is. Cholesterol is a life-giving molecule, and supposedly bad cholesterol, LDL, is crucial for healing in the immune system, okay? We've had cholesterol backwards as well. It's like blaming firemen for the fires. Wherever you see a fireman, there's firemen, but the fires are not caused by the firemen. They respond to the fire. Cholesterol is the same way. It responds to try to heal vascular and damage and inflammation and whatnot. It is a response, not a cause of vascular and other diseases. As we get older, in fact, the higher our LDL, the longer we live. All right, so our understanding of cholesterol is completely messed up. So I don't order lipids because I'm never going to start a statin drug in a woman who's trying to get pregnant. Pregnancy is a contraindication to statins, and even the risk of vascular disease with high cholesterol is very, very low. There's something called a hazard ratio or relative risk. Abnormal cholesterol at the worst may increase risk 1.3 times. That's called an association. It's very, very weak. Now, things like high blood sugar and diabetes increase the risk of vascular disease tenfold. That's clearly causative, clearly something that is much more important for vascular disease and a health condition, much more important to treat than lipids. So in summary, I never get lipid levels because it doesn't change our management. They're going to get better. Triglycerides, which everyone agrees are abnormal, are always going to come down with carbohydrate restriction and health improvement measures. Another controversy. There is nothing healthy about a vegan or a vegetarian diet or a lifestyle, okay? I know this is going to upset a lot of people. Now, we need to have the conversation about sustainability of the environment, carbon footprint, can everybody eat, etc. Can current practices be sustained? I understand this. This is a very, very important discussion and needs to be had. But don't tell me it is healthy. There's been no society on earth that has been purely vegan or vegetarian. The one or two societies that claim they're vegan or vegetarian, in fact, are eating bugs in their lentils or in their grains and whatnot, and that's where they get their vitamin B12 and some of their protein. I know this is going to upset a lot of people. I know there are ethical reasons not to consume animals. I understand this. I'm sympathetic to it. But don't tell me it's healthy. Are there alternatives? We can certainly talk about it. Now, this is not double-blind, placebo-controlled evidence, but I have some evidence for you. We know what human beings have been eating for thousands and thousands of years, and these are the conditions that women with PCOS are suited for. And here's an example. These are Paleolithic points. These are from Native Americans. Some of these points are ancient. Some of them are 13,000 years old. And they have been found between the ribs of mastodons, giant sloths, ancient bisons, etc. We know what human beings were eating. We know they were eating meat. We know they were digging the marrow out of the bones, which is very high in fat. We know this was a human diet. And we know that women with PCOS in the old days were reproducing and having children because here we are. So those are some controversies in the world of PCOS and health and weight loss. I hope you found that helpful. I'm looking forward to more podcasts in the future where we can discuss these in more detail. But there you go. There's the summary and synopsis of PCOS. I hope you've enjoyed our 8 videos in this series. And I wish you fertility and good health.